The basement room. I wasn't looking for anything fancy when I rented the house, just a roof over my head and a quiet place to think. It was the kind of place you pass by without noticing, tucked at the end of a narrow cul-de-sac, with a cracked driveway and a rusting mailbox leaning at an angle. The landlord, a wiry man with hollow cheeks, had only one rule. "Don't go in the basement room," he said, his voice a rasp that sounded like it had been dragged across gravel. "Why not?" I asked, more out of habit than interest. "It's locked. Nothing in there for you." His thin lips pressed into a line, and I didn't push further. For the first few weeks, I didn't give the basement a second thought. The house creaked and groaned like old houses do, and I told myself the occasional sound of movement beneath the floorboards was just the pipe settling. But at night, when the world was quiet, I sometimes thought I heard a faint scraping, like something being dragged across the floor below me. One night, when the wind was howling and the rain battered the windows, my curiosity finally got the better of me. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer and headed down the narrow staircase to the basement. The door to the forbidden room stood at the end of the dim hallway, its paint peeling and the keyhole rusted shut. But as I approached, I noticed something strange. The door was slightly ajar. The air inside was damp and cold, heavy with the smell of mildew. I swung the door open and stepped inside, shining the flashlight across the room. It was mostly empty, just cracked concrete walls, a bare bulb dangling from the ceiling, and a single object resting on a dust-covered table in the center. An old photograph. I picked it up carefully, brushing away years of grime to get a better look. The blood drained from my face. It was me. Not just a resemblance, but me. The same slouched posture, the same jacket I was wearing in the moment, even the same scratch on my forehead from where I'd accidentally walked into the low-hanging branch of the maple tree outside earlier that week. It didn't make sense. The photo was yellowed and aged, its corners curling as though it had been taken decades ago. But there was no denying it. I was staring at myself, standing in a room I'd never been to before. Suddenly, the door creaked shut behind me, and the bulb above flickered. My flashlight sputtered, plunging the room into a hazy dimness. That's when I heard it. The faint sound of breathing, slow and deliberate, coming from the shadows in the far corner of the room. I wasn't alone. "Who's there?" I whispered, though my voice barely carried. The breathing grew louder, closer. My heart thundered in my chest as I stepped backward, clutching the photograph like a shield. And then I saw it. A figure, faint and indistinct, stepping forward from the darkness. Its features were hazy, as if it were partially dissolved into the air, but one thing was clear. It had my face. It grinned at me, a wide, unnatural smile that stretched too far, and then it spoke in a voice that sounded like mine, twisted and warped. "You shouldn't have come here." The bulb flickered again, plunging the room into total darkness. My flashlight sputtered back to life just in time for me to catch a glimpse of the figure reaching toward me, its hand stretching and distorting as though made of smoke. I bolted for the door, slamming it behind me and scrambling up the stairs. When I reached the safety of my room, I locked the door and pressed my ear to the floor, straining to hear. But there was nothing. The next morning, I packed my things and left without a word to the landlord. As I drove away, I glanced back at the house one last time. The basement window was open, and something was watching me from the shadows.